gentlemen, welcome to the American Security Project. I'm Steve Cheney, the Chief Executive Officer. For those not familiar with the American Security Project, founded in 2005, 2006, after the 2004 election by Senators Kerry and Hart, Hagel, and Rudman. And the intent behind the organization was that we would take topical issues from a national security perspective. So we built a board that was comprised of a third flag and general officers, a third senators, both Republican and Democrat, and then a third businessmen and businesswomen. And we take issues like climate change, energy security, nuclear security, terrorism, asymmetric operations, and national security, and hopefully do factual studies of these issues and present them to the general public and to Capitol Hill in an effort to do it in a bipartisan way and influence perhaps legislation in our government to make for a better, more secure United States. We've had particular success on a number of issues, not the least of which was New START, where we worked very hard to get that passed, and we did. We've got another issue, several issues we're currently working, like Law of the Sea Convention, which is probably next up for us, which we're very interested in. And of course, our board members used to be Secretaries Hagel and Kerry. They both left in January, as you would imagine. But if you're interested in what their positions might be on any of those issues, I recommend you hit our website and see what we've done over the last 3 or 4 years, and you can get a very good idea of what's high on their priority list. Today we're going to talk a little bit about Egypt, and you might wonder what's our interest in Egypt. And it's of great concern to the United States, perhaps more concern than many would imagine. Stability in the Middle East, of course, is of paramount concern to the United States. You can relate that to energy, climate, and our own national security when you talk terrorism and asymmetric operations. It's a very complex situation in the Middle East, and certainly in Egypt. And I'm certainly no expert in it. I'm a retired Marine Brigadier General, and one of my last jobs was Inspector General of the Marine Corps, but I have been to Egypt, but not recently. Hence, it's a true delight today to have Senator Mona Makram-Ebeid come talk to us about the situation on the ground in Egypt. And we're most interested, those who've been following in the press. And I think, Senator, I hope you can dispel some of the myths of what we read in today's papers, because I think there's a lot of mythology in what the reporters are reporting here today. And that's part of what our purpose here in ASP is, to get the true facts on the ground out, let you make your own conclusions, and then certainly ask the senator about what she feels is going on. And of course, she's a very prominent Egyptian, a graduate of Harvard University, also the American University in Cairo and Cairo University, and a member of the Egyptian Senate since January of 2013. So what I would like to do this afternoon is introduce the senator, let her talk for as long as you would like, and then maybe we'll have a little bit of a conversation, then open up to Q&A. When they do Q&A, we'll do it a little structured. We've got a roving microphone. This is being recorded. We will put it up on our website this afternoon. We are tweeting it, by the way, so in case you want to follow it that way. When I ask you to ask a question, we'll hand the mic to you. If you can please identify yourself, stand up, identify yourself, and make it kind of a short question so we can get as many in as we can. With that, let me turn it over to Senator Dr. Mona Makram-Ebeid.
Hello, everybody. I am particularly honored.
Hand me that and I'll turn it on, I think. Yeah. I think that works there.
I am particularly honored and privileged, really, to come and meet you today, and in particularly that I'm just returning from Halifax, where I have attended the biggest annual forum on international security, which was very well attended, including by Minister Chuck Hagel and Senator and Senator McCain, and of course a number of ministers of defense, which was quite an interesting atmosphere, particularly that the Iran deal happened while we were there, and we attended a fascinating debate between the Israeli former Minister of Defense, or retired general, and the American counterpart. So this was really The other things also that was very interesting and on which I was a panelist was the war against terror. And although I didn't plan to, but I will start from that. I will start from Egyptian-American relations, because I think that these have been very affected lately by particularly this misunderstanding, first of all, of what happened and why it happened, and now with the suspension of the military, part of the military and financial aid. So let me start by saying that Egypt is one of the major countries throughout the Middle East that has been struggling since 2011. Since 2011, Egypt has been struggling with the aftermath and with the fallout of the Arab Spring, which I don't like this term, but it's the term that is used, in 2011. Today, Egypt is at a critical juncture, and it is currently trying to find a suitable governing structure with a population of about between 85 and 90 million, a strategic geographic position in the region, and in fact, according to most analysts, it is the pivotal country of the region. So whatever happens in Egypt will have its repercussions, whether negative or positive, on the rest of the region. So now we are facing upcoming events of great importance, and we believe that the upcoming events will determine the governing and democratic foundations of the country and set precedent for the next generations and probably, as I said, for the rest of the region. Now, I forgot to say about one of the main challenges that Egypt is facing today is a struggle against the terrorists in the Sinai. Having said that, we believe that Washington should have focused instead on preserving its strategically important geopolitical interests and not on using aid suspension to influence the country's domestic politics. As I told Minister Chuck Hagel when I was in Halifax, there is consensus among Egyptian's political elite, and particularly by the General Sisi himself, in his several statements, that no country could replace the strategic relationship with the United States. At the same time, we are filled with a strong sentiment of disappointment towards the White House with the latest move. And here I'd like to underline that if the peace treaty with Israel has been sustainable for 30 years, it is thanks to the military leadership in both countries, Egypt and the United States, and not the leaders of both countries. It is mainly the cooperation between the military leadership. As I said, again, the pillar of the relationship has always depended on military and security cooperation. And therefore we believe that this partnership, that using this partnership as a bargaining chip to shape Egyptian domestic politics can only be counterproductive and has only hurt, until now, mutual interests in the region. If the rationale behind the White House's policy is based on the fact that it views the removal of former President Morsi as an undemocratic step, it is important to realize that the Brotherhood was not a democratic one in the first place. I, as a senator, has lived with them for a whole year, and I accepted to be in the Senate, although the liberal tendency, let's say, was not approving of my being in the Senate and joining because of the presence of the Muslim Brothers. But I refused that kind of argument because I think we have to know each other. And I think that the Senate presented me with a very good platform to get to know both the Muslim Brothers and the Salafis. So I would say that since the Constitution, until the Constitutional Declaration of last year, November the 22nd, 2012, when Mr. Mursi's declaration, which I believe this was the start of the real opposition. Because before that, people were giving him the benefit of the doubt. But the real opposition against his rule is when he granted himself absolute powers and put himself above the law. All measures which violated, as I said, all principles of democracy. Where was the United States then? Why didn't it suspend aid then? The US equally kept silent in the face of the violent crackdown that followed on protesters who opposed Mr. Morsi's powers right after this declaration. And as I said, the US did not at the time pontificate to Morsi about democracy or suspend military aid to Egypt, etc. So what we see today is that the White House has taken contradictory positions over the 3 years, sometimes putting principles above interests, but more often interests above principles. Hence, the terrible confusion we are in Cairo. And I believe that the same confusion exists also here in the United States. It is important for the West, and in particular for the United States, to realize that for democracy to really flourish, we should realize that this will take patience and time. It cannot be realized overnight in a country that has not known democracy for the past 60 years. There's a whole new generation that doesn't know what democracy is all about. And of course, the violence that has been triggered lately has not been helpful. So, one thing is for sure, is that a close strategic relationship between the US and Egypt should not be hindered by dictates concerning domestic politics, especially when they know that the majority of Egyptians are satisfied with the removal of the former president from power. So Washington should stop acting as the main advocate for the future of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egyptian politics, as it will only put more tension on the US-Egyptian relationship. The US ought today to preserve its strategically important geopolitical interests and let Egyptians determine their own future. If they take the wrong choice, as they did before, they will pay for it. They paid for it for a whole year because they took the wrong choice. So leave the Egyptians to do their own choice. Now, another thing that has triggered concern here in the US was the recent visit of both the Russian defense and ministers to Cairo, and this raised many questions about the significance of this move. However, Egyptian-Russian cooperation should not be seen as a pivot away from Washington. But after the US suspension of military and financial aid, it was normal for Egypt to broaden its security cooperation with other countries in order to preserve its basic national security priorities. The Minister of Foreign Affairs was quite clear about that. He said there is no relationship that subsidizes another. We are adding to our relationship, we are adding to our plurality and broaden our security cooperation ties. So the Egyptian authorities made it quite clear to the White House that what has happened was a huge miscalculation. They should not forget, and this is particularly important, that the Egyptian military has been entrenched in a critical and difficult fight in Sinai against major terrorist cells, which were allowed to establish a major stronghold there during the one-year rule of the Muslim Brothers. This reality directly jeopardizes both Egyptian and Israeli national security and threatens regional stability. In August, this past August, 2 buses carrying 25 Egyptian soldiers were ambushed by terrorists and killed on the spot. The same a few days before I left Cairo, that is 3 weeks ago, when I met Paul in Egypt, also the same thing happened in Rafah. We would have expected stronger support from Washington for the military's efforts to combat terrorism in the Sinai. But the exact opposite happened with the suspension of aid and delivery of weapons, particularly the Apache attack helicopters, which are used against terrorists. So what we have today again is total confusion about the US intentions. We get different messages. Messages that come to the government from the Pentagon and State Department on the one hand, on the one side, that is from Secretary Kerry and Minister Chuck Hagel, and from the White House on the other hand. So this kind of ambiguity serves to undermine the strategic US-Egyptian relationship and jeopardize mutual interests at a time when the region faces enormous upheavals. This was my last point. I shall go to my first point now, but what I wanted to ask you, I don't think I will do it, that instead of concentrating on one issue, such as the drafting of the Constitution or the controversial Assembly law, both that are subjects of intense discussion and polarization, I would like to ask you to name me 3 issues which you are interested in and which I will be able to tackle and open the debate for questions and answers. So can we have 3 questions here?
Let me just, Senator, thank you for your comments. And
no, they're not finished.
You're not finished.
No,
okay.
no.
I was going to give you 3 issues.
No.
Go ahead.
Look, tell me the 3 issues so that I can tackle them.
Yeah. When you look at one of the biggest problems in the United States is we have such a short memory, and it's a press cycle of 24 hours, literally. So when you look at the press, they talk about the incarceration of women, for instance, was mentioned prominently in the press this week. Or you talk about crackdown on civil unrest under the current administration versus the previous administration. So those are 2 big issues. And then a third, on the foreign aid side of the House, the problem here in the United States is foreign aid is such a really small part of the budget, but nonetheless it gets played politically so big in Congress. They throw it out there and say, oh, we're supplying arms to people who had a coup, which of course I don't like that word, and I don't think you do either. Is it that significant to you, that amount of foreign aid? So those are 3 issues that I would throw out there.
Okay, anybody else wants to add? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Can you tell me why Egypt and Turkey are quarreling?
Are quarreling?
Yes.
Okay.
Nick?
Yes?
Madam Senator, would you be able to talk about how you think the Egyptian people will respond to 3 national polls in 6 months? One for the constitutional referendum, one for the parliamentary elections, and one for presidential elections.
We're going to try to get a microphone around here. Yes, sir.
No, it's finished. 3.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So let me first answer you. Women. Now, women, which is extremely extremely upsetting, from the beginning of the revolution in 2011, although they were in the forefront of the people asking for change, they were all there, and all kinds of women covered, uncovered, short dress, mini skirts, whatever you want. People from different strata of the social strata of the society, like socialites, you know, with their long hair and their Louis Vuitton bags. Everybody was there, and that's why it was such a fabulous event at the time. After this, somehow, whether it was the transitional government of the first military takeover, the first military transitional government, or whether it was followed, or now in the Constituent Assembly, women are not given the proper place that they believe they deserve. Under the one-year rule of the Muslim Brotherhood, this was a terrible setback for all their rights. Because, for instance, genital mutilation, for which we have fought for 20 years, they wanted to bring it back. They lowered the age of marriage to 9 years old, young little girls of 9 years old. There was discussion of annulling the right of women to divorce, which we had obtained 5 years ago, and so on. Then there was, of course, what you all read about, sexual harassment. Sexual harassment, to my mind, was not done with the idea of sexual harassment, but rather with the idea of terrorizing women from participation. They did not want women to participate. That was the best thing, the best way to prevent them is either to spread the thought that they will be sexually assaulted, as in the metros, and so I don't say that it didn't happen. Of course, it did happen, but I mean that the main idea was to keep women out of politics. They do not want women to participate in politics, although women are 53% of the society. Civil unrest. Yes, there is civil unrest. There is a lot of violence going on. And of course, there are the issues of the assembly law, etc. So, one issue that I'm blaming the government for is the negligence in investigating the large number of killings since the 25th of January in 2011 and not punishing those responsible. I think that this is quite a big mistake, and also the failure to develop ground rules for the political game. Nothing is clear. There is no vision for the future. There are mechanisms that will be put in place to have the referendum first on the constitution and then parliamentary elections and presidential elections. There's even talk now to have presidential elections before the parliamentary elections and so on. So, but the rules themselves for the political game to allow the Muslim Brothers to participate and to allow anybody else to participate are not clear. Now, I am also against the continuing media focus on demonizing all the time the Brotherhood. I would have preferred the media to discuss the broader problems that we are facing, such as rebuilding the state economically, socially, culturally, building institutions, and so on. And, of course, to address pressing economic problems. As for the law, the assembly law, I have some reservations, but not much, because I have seen the protest laws in democratic countries. There is no democratic country who accepts that protesters should just go and protest in front of government buildings like the Ministry of Defense and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, or places of worship like the churches and the mosques, etc., or to attack personnel from the military or the police. So I believe that everybody must be ruled by the rule of law. This is new. Everybody must abide by the rule of law. And if the law says that you need permission to demonstrate, this exists in every country. Depending. One is you just advise them that you're going to walk in such a street from such a time to such a time. Others demand that you get a written permission. Others demand that the permission should come from the Ministry of Justice and not the Ministry of the Interior. I mean, these are all details. But the core of it is that you cannot act just on your own. Second, foreign aid. No, foreign aid is not, you know, the mantra of everything. Particularly that in Egypt today, you know, we have a lot of billionaires, and I think that 4 or 5 of them could collect the amount of money that the US is providing. But that's not the point. The point is that the aid of US dollars is a moral position. It's a symbol of the strategic cooperation between Egypt and the United States. It's not its dollar value, but it is this significance, this symbolic significance of the alliance, if you like, or the cooperation, or whatever you want to call it. The gentleman here asked about Egypt and Turkey. You know, Turkey is the former Ottoman Empire. And this man who's there now, who is called Erdogan, thought that he was the new caliphate, the new successor of the Ottoman Caliphate. And when he first came to Egypt 2 years ago, he made the Egyptians believe that we have a return of the caliphate. He made the Egyptians believe, and the Egyptians went and said, you know, the caliphate is back, Islamist caliphate, and so on. But when he started to speak about secularism, the next day the same Egyptians said, how dare he interfere in internal politics. Anyway, but now what is happening is that Turkey was supporting the Muslim Brotherhood. And that was quite clear to all of us. And interfering, really, that's why last week only there was a dispensation of both ambassadors. The ambassador to Egypt was in Turkey was returned to Egypt, and the ambassador of Turkey to Egypt was asked to leave. So the relations are not so good today. There is a lot of tension. But personally, I believe that they will be resumed very soon, because economic relations between the two countries are very important. And the relationship between the peoples of the two countries are very important also. It is only the statements of Mr. Erdogan that has, you know, embittered the whole situation. And of course, what he did in Gezi Square, or the Taksim Square, which you have all watched, and we didn't hear so much American condemnation of that excessive use of force. The last one, the three that you are asking, which is what do I expect? I don't know what you mean, but by what do I expect? I expect that the referendum, hopefully, because the constitution that came out is not bad at all, I believe that we will have a good majority. But the important thing is to have a greater majority than the 2012 constitution of Mr. Morsi, which is of the Brotherhood. So they got, at the time, I think, 67%. So hopefully we'll be able to get more. Now, about the presidential elections, until now, the man who has the greatest popularity in Egypt is General Sisi. People feel that he has saved them from being on the brink of civil war. And his attitude you know, first of all, he's very savvy, he's intelligent, he's quiet, which is not the case for many Egyptians. And he has an attractive personality. And he says the right things at the right moment, because, you know, Egyptians are very emotional. And women think that he's good looking. I don't know. And what else? Well, he's got it all until now. Now, is it in his favor to run for elections, or will it be better for him to be behind the scene and we have sort of a scenario like Turkey 30 years ago? I don't know yet. That's what I'm telling you. Parliamentary elections, I believe that the Muslim Brothers will participate. Muslim Brothers are there. They're not going to vanish overnight like some people think. They are there. I believe that what is happening today is different than what happened 50 years ago, when they were accused of killing 2 prime ministers and 1 judge and so on, big personalities before 1952, which caused the king to kill or to be behind the assassination of the supreme guide Hassan al-Banna. Today, I think the strategy is different. The strategy is to get the leaders of this movement incarcerated and judged, not just incarcerated. Those who have committed crimes and who have incited crimes, who have incited violent crimes against people, against premises and so on, should be brought to justice. There's no going back on that. They should be brought to justice, and the last word is to the court, neither to the government nor to the army. But that leaves the rest of the Muslim Brothers. They're facing the people today. It's the people who are attacking them. It's the people who feel so frustrated by 1 year of their atrocities that they're the ones who are attacking them. It's not the government and it's not the army. So I believe that some of them who have not had their hands soiled or soaked in blood, I think that they will participate, at least if there is, of course, we are waiting now for the new system, whether it will be first past the poll or whether it will be by slate proportion. So I believe that if it is first past the poll, they will participate. They will participate as independents, so as to go round the probable ban on political parties built or founded on religion. Now, this was something that a great majority of analysts have asked for, is to ban parties based on religion. Now, I believe that for what we have seen until now really is the demise, I would say, of the Muslim Brotherhood as leaders. Because what they're asking for, the ongoing violence, which borders on terrorism, can be considered their last desperate attempt. They want to return to the 30th of June ante, which is impossible, which is recalling the ousted president, reinstating the constitution of 2012, reopening the Senate, of which I was a member, and I had asked it to be dissolved because it was illegally founded. And now there are many who are asking on, as I said, a ban on forming political parties on a religious basis. Until now, their party exists. It has not been declared dissolved. On the other hand, there is tremendous pressure being exerted on the current government to include or exclude the Muslim Brothers in the new political landscape. That's the big debate we are in front in Egypt today. So such pressure has come from within and from outside Egypt. But, and that was the main question that I faced when I met authorities here and in Canada and in France, and I've been on the go for the past 2 months trying to explain the clauses of the roadmap. So, the real question was that, is there any possibility, if any, of the reintegration of the Muslim Brothers members within the national fabric? That was the recurring question. And my answer was what I just told you: those who have committed crimes should be brought to justice. The others, it's not all of them who have committed crime. There are those who have caused the death of so many innocent people. Only lately you have seen how they torched a church and they killed 2 little girls coming out of a wedding. They torched about 80 churches and ransacked shops belonging to Christians, mainly in Upper Egypt, and government premises. All this you cannot accept. They should accept the rules of the game. And the rules of the game is the establishment of a democratic, egalitarian, and modern state. We have had a modern state for 200 years now, since the father of modern Egypt installed it, which was Muhammad Ali. So, and they must accept the values and norms of citizenship, which means citizenship for all and the respect of the rule of law. In this instance, they can participate. I used to give the example of the Communist Party in Italy in the 60s. They were the biggest party in Italy, and yet they never came to power. Why? Because there was an alternative, and people thought the alternative was better. Anyway, my conclusion is that the Muslim Brotherhood organization will not cease to exist. The reintegration scenario has been dismissed by the rising popular pressure and a growing number of citizens who have called for full exclusion of them. On the other hand, reintegration has been a primary request from certain Western countries and a few political analysts inside. But what is not making this reintegration possible is that the MB, the Muslim Brotherhood themselves, have rejected it. You can't force them. And there is a kind of a self-denial on the ground, which is what I told you before, the return of the president and so on. Meanwhile, they're staging the role of the victims here, and particularly in the West. Now, one can say that there is a growing disillusionment within the organization of the Muslim Brothers because of the failures that have been caused, and because these trusted leaders today have really failed their mandate and failed in their credibility. So today the members and supporters face a highly hostile public. And I believe the leadership has ended its political career. But that does not mean that it will not continue to sponsor violence, although their delegitimization will definitely impact on their efforts to regroup and to get new members. But they will remain a security threat, but to my mind they cannot destabilize the regime as long as the regime is resting on a wide popular base. Until now, it is resting on a wide popular base. And that is why national social cohesion is so important in the current situation. So banning the MBs neither represents its end nor the end of deep-rooted fundamentalism. It's not only them who brought the fundamentalism. This exists since Anwar Sadat, since Sadat's time. Now, a few words about the constitution. I think it's a good constitution. There are some reservations, like they are mingling between a presidential system and a parliamentary system, so they want to give more prerogatives to the prime minister over the president, which I don't think is the right time to do, not because they had two miserable experiences last year and the year before, that they should give more prerogatives to the prime minister. I think we should remain with a strong with a strong leader, with a strong president, and I don't think it's the time now to really install it. A few words about the Copts in Egypt. As you know, the Copts in Egypt, they number between 10 and 15 million. We don't know the exact number. It's the only thing that we don't know the number about is the Copts in Egypt. So many of them believe that the government is lax in protecting their community and securing their rights. The situation of Christians in Egypt remains worrying and unclear, as discrimination against Christians is a highly important issue and one that must be addressed in an unequivocal manner. Now, in the last years, religion replaced loyalty to the homeland. And in this context, matters which should have been governed by law were governed more by identity politics. So, churches became flashpoints for anti-Coptic attacks. And I am among those who have asked that the identity, that your identity should be removed from identity documents. I mean, they shouldn't say Christian, Muslim, Sunni, or whatever. This is only there to trigger dissensions. The other thing is that until now, none of the perpetrators of sectarian violence were condemned or brought to justice, etc. So what we have today really in Egypt is the real challenge is to build state institutions. Institutions meaning that you are ruled by institutions and not governed by men. Not government by men and their... it is important to note a state institution that will guarantee all citizens' constitutional rights. At that moment, the Christians will not have much to recriminate against. But it is important to note that under Mubarak, he treated the Christians as members of the church, not members of the nation. He left all their file to the Pope and to the security. And this is really triggering, it's not really triggering unity at all, or national cohesion. But I still feel very energized by what we saw during the 18 days in Tahrir Square, the solidarity, the conviviality between all, men and women, all strata, etc., etc. I don't want to be longer than that because I want to hear your last word. Is the important thing is to prevent radicalization today at the grassroots level. Thank you for your attention. Sorry if I have gone a bit beyond the 3 questions, and I'm all